I'm Laura Brogan, and this is What's Left.
When I said, hey, hey, what's wrong with you? I want to take you back tonight just to see you smile. You know I'm gonna be there 1, 2, 3, 4.
Thanks everyone for joining us. Today I've got my co-host George joining us. Hi George.
You all right?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Are you?
Yeah, not so bad.
Fabulous. And on today's episode, we've got Khalid Sadur. Khalid was an independent candidate in the last general election, and he's a candidate in the local by-elections. How are you, Khalid?
Hi,
Very well, thank you. Just come back from canvassing, so yeah, feeling good.
Oh, fantastic. How are things on the ground?
No, it's good. It's good. There's obviously a lot of antipathy towards the mainstream parties.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of discontent. So yeah, it is a challenge to make sure people understand that we're not the mainstream parties and we're independent. But yeah, it's you can tell a lot of people are very disenchanted with politics post general election. Really, lots of disappointment.
So what where are you? Where are you standing?
Indeed. So I stood in Edmonton, Winchmore Hill, which is in North London. So it's in the London Borough of Enfield. So we're quite near to Camden, obviously where Andrew Feinstein stood, and obviously quite near to Islington where Jeremy Corbyn stood, and obviously not too far from Ilford where Liam Mohammed nearly defeated Wes Streeting in that race as well. So there's quite a few of us very close together in terms of independence in North London. So yeah, hopefully North London will become a very much a left area going forward.
Yeah, lovely little independent hub. That'd be fantastic, wouldn't it?
Indeed.
So, Khalid, tell us a little bit about how you got into politics, how you ended up standing in the last election.
Yeah, that's a long story, but we'll try to summarize it. Exactly. So I've never traditionally been involved in politics. So I'm on the wrong side of 50 now, and I'm very political. I've been very political. I mean, I studied politics at A-level back in the day, so it's not something that's immune to me. But then I veered off into a career in finance. So my background is an accountant. I'm a chartered accountant. I'm a trained chartered accountant. I've worked in the city of London for a good many years working in the account. So not very political at all. But I've obviously been very close to politics and obviously taken a good interest in politics. And I would say probably very much a Labour supporter pretty much all my life. I remember when as a kid, remembering the 1987 general election and Neil Kinnock lost, and I was like, it was like a real gut wrench that was in terms of politics. So yes, I've been political, but not been a member of any party. But that all changed for a lot of us on October the 7th. That day, obviously, for so many people has changed their career. Has changed the path of their careers and their lives. And for me, the big change, not only obviously what happened on October the 7th, but then what happened at the parliamentary vote, where Keir Starmer effectively whipped his Labour MPs to not vote for the ceasefire and to abstain. And for me, that was the last straw. That was the last straw, that a party that I considered to be the party of the people, the party that stood for justice and against oppression, could not actually vote for a ceasefire at that point in time, even though a lot of Labour councillors had resigned and a lot of members of the Labour Party, and obviously a lot of actual MPs rebelled against him on the vote itself, and that set me on a personal journey where we really just couldn't really stomach the thought of actually being able to vote Labour when with the upcoming general election, and it was like, when do we really want to do this? And we were somewhat kind of cocooned by the fact that we had a very pro-Palestinian MP in Kate Ossamore here, and so there really wasn't going to be a challenge against Kate because she was very much pro-Palestinian. But then she got suspended, as you may recall. She got suspended for her genocide tweet And we in Edmonton and Winchell Hill had no idea whether she was going to be reinstated or not before the election. And we certainly thought, well, hang on, if this happens, we know that Starmer's going to put someone of his ilk in the seat, and we weren't going to stand for that. And so that was where we started effectively our grassroots movement. So we started a group called the Enfield Community Action Group, ECAG, in March of this year, basically designed to build from the grassroots upwards a kind of political movement in Enfield, which had never been done before. So a lot of us were like, well, it's been traditionally Labour Conservative in our area. Even the Greens and Lib Dems have been nowhere. There's no third party. So a lot of people were like raising eyebrows in terms of well, what are we doing? It's like, but we persevered, and we were very much, Gaza was the touch paper, but then obviously, from a domestic perspective, the 2-child benefit cap, what we've seen since with the pensioners, there's a huge amount of issues, frankly, that away from Gaza, which needed representation, which people needed representation. So after like nearly 30, 40 years of not being very political, I started this group. I founded the group. We kicked off with the launch meetings, started to get members, started to get people, put up a WhatsApp group, and the election was called, and suddenly we found ourselves standing 3 parliamentary candidates. So I was one of them, but we stood 3, and that's the kind of the journey that we've been on, very, very much kind of, saying what we like to say. To some extent, we've had enough, and we need a voice, and frankly, the mainstream parties don't give us that. So yeah, a very probably untraditional route to standing for Parliament. Yeah.
Well, it's untraditional in the modern context, but I think going back to the sort of founding principles of, for example, the Labour Party, I think it would have been the traditional route, wouldn't it? It would have been people who were actually, active within, probably within trade unions, probably within local communities, local socialist societies, that would have been the people that we actually put forward to Parliament. So
yeah, you want people from that area to represent that area. And to be fair, we did actually, we didn't have that much time, obviously, between March and then when the elections were, but we were actually going through a selection process. So we were going through a process where we were trying to get people to come forward. I was particularly adamant that we try to get someone young to increase engagement with the youth. Unfortunately, because Rishi took everyone by surprise, we didn't manage to finalize that selection process. It was ongoing. So I found myself in the position where we managed to fill 2 of the 3 seats, but the Edmonton seat we didn't have anyone. So I found myself being the candidate on the kind of the last resort candidate to stand there. And so, but I think it was important that we stood. And it is important, I think, that we as a group, kind of continue that kind of level of trying to bring people into politics. I think there's politics is seen as such a dirty word in some people's minds that that people don't want to get involved. And I think if people realise that actually it can be a change for good, if done properly, it can be a change for good. And I think we need to have a discussion with people and with the local community to say, look, it's not a bad thing. It is really about representing you, your family, your community, and trying to make sure that if there are decisions being made, that you're at the table, and that you're part of that conversation, and you're not just left behind because you think some ruling class makes all the decisions and you don't have an interest. I think it's really important, and young people in particular know that they should be involved and they can have a voice.
Yeah, I think something that I always think about is there's a little saying, you can't be what you can't see. If you can't be it, if you can't see it, you can't be it. And I think that's something that's really sort of been evident with the sort of the rise of the independent movement. It's showing people that actually who would think politics isn't for them, that politics is for everybody. We should all be involved. We should all be having a voice, have representation that, like you say, represents you, your community, and all of that, all of that sort of stuff. So, excuse me, why do you think that politics has moved so far away from that local representation?
Well, it's interesting. So before we made the decision to stand against Kate Osamor in Edmonton, We actually went to see her. So the action group, wrote her a letter, and we brought along kind of 5 representative people from the community. So we had a trade union representative, we had a person from the Palestinian Solidarity Committee, people from the mosque, and so as a delegation, we went to see her and ask her about whether she, what kind of MP would she be, given what we'd seen from Keir Starmer.
Mm-hmm.
And rather disappointingly, although probably not unexpectedly, she was very clear that she was limited in what she could say publicly, as an MP. Was very pro-Palestine. Obviously, we knew that from her past, voting record, etc. But made it very clear that her hands were tied. And then we all came out of that meeting really quite disappointed, really, because we wanted an MB at this point in time to be more vocal, not less.
Mm-hmm.
In what we've seen in Gaza in particular, which is why we made the decision to stand against her. But to come back to your question, the reason I think it happens is because politics is now a career. It's a career for most. It's not about representing people. It's not about doing the casework. Getting problems solved. It's about, well, what's the next step on the ladder? What's next for me? What can I achieve? How far can I go? And I think that is the problem. And I think, like I say, given my background, like I say, being an accountant in finance, I'm completely away from that. And so when I come to it, I come to it with slightly naive eyes to some extent, because I just want to do good. I just want to help people, and people kind of think, well, that's a bit naive, isn't it? I was like, well, yeah, maybe so, but ultimately, isn't that what politicians should be doing? Shouldn't elected officials being there representing and actually doing things for their constituents? So, but yes, it may be naive, but it brings us back to what our elected representatives should be doing, And I think it's important, because people have lost that connection. That's why people, I think, have lost that. There's that such disillusionment with our politicians. They can't relate to them. Because they, like you said earlier, it's almost like they're a political class, they're a ruling class. They're different from us, and so we're not allowed to be at that table. And I think that clearly needs to be broken.
Well, I think that's there's a very important point in there as well, Khalid, because we don't have a representative democracy. We don't have representatives in that sense. So there is no mechanism by which to recall a member of parliament. Yeah. Even though there is at least a 5-year electoral cycle, maybe sooner, but even then, it isn't just as cut and dry as the way the electoral system works. It isn't just as cut and dry as we shall get rid of you if you don't represent us properly. It is the first past the post system doesn't probably help, but also the choice between normally, if you're lucky, 3 parties is normally the choice that you get, and it's normally a game of the lesser of 3 evils, isn't it?
Yes, exactly, and I think that's what leads to the disillusionment. That's what when you look at the turnout at the last election, and you look at how much Labour actually got, a lower number of votes than compared to Corbyn in 2017 and 2019, you kind of realise that actually there's just lots of people who just voted Labour because they didn't want the Tories, but it wasn't real democracy. It wasn't, like you say, in a real democracy, you vote with your conscience, and you vote for the candidate that you actually want to elect. That's real democracy. This lesser of the evils thing, it drives me crazy in terms of the strategic. Well, he ain't bad as that guy, so I'm going to vote for it. Well, no, you should vote for who you want to represent you. You should vote for the party that actually represents your ideals. That's true democracy. And so, yeah, to that extent, George, I would agree. We don't really have that real representation in our country. Partly because of the electoral system, for sure.
And we haven't got all the rights that were in the People's Charter, the Chartist movement, and we haven't got all the rights that were down in the the Levellers' demands. Even hundreds of years later, those fundamental democratic rights haven't been enshrined in our constitution.
I think that, I mean, like you say, those rights have been eroded. We're looking at the erosion of any protest rights, rights to trade union, things that they can do. And it's just, again, just limiting the power that anybody has or feels like they can have, or any of, you know, to affect any change. So again, I think that's why it's so fantastic, the independent movement that we're seeing sort of springing up, is that showing actually people have got a voice, you can use it. You know, it might be a bit of a slow burn to get some change going, but I think it's reassuring to see people getting behind these candidates like yourself and others, that there's a desire for something different, there's a hunger for change, and, you know, people are willing to sort of get out, and, you know, you're listening to yourself with activists and stuff to come out and campaign for people.
And I think as the movement grows, people come with it, don't they? Because you build credibility. I mean, you know, the fact that I get recognised at, you know, standing in the council by-election because I stood in the general election gives credibility, because, you know, you're not just some independent that, you know, his wife and his family voted for, you know, and that's it. It's like, you know, you've got, you know, we got 4% of the vote at the general election, you know, considering we started with 4 weeks to go. It was an incredible achievement. So, you know, and that builds credibility. You know, you build name recognition, you build brand recognition in terms of the independent movement. And for me, I think it's the way it should be built. You know, from the bottom up. You know, it really is about people coming together, like-minded people, wanting change, wanting to do something different, and then bringing people along on that journey, because people feel invested. When people actually feel that they're part of something, they're a lot more invested. You know, and it isn't just a card carrying member that you've got. You've got someone who's actually, you know, wants to do something, wants to help, wants to go out canvassing, wants to go leafleting, you know, and they feel that they're doing something. And for a lot of people, that's how they want it. That's how they feel politically. They just want to be felt, you know, they just want to feel like they're doing something, that they are affecting change. And I think, you know, we you know, should be able to facilitate that. You know, these independent groups should hopefully be able to facilitate that, and to say, look, we can do something, both, you know, nationally, but also at a local level as well. And I think it's important because it strengthens our community, you know, and we've seen our communities broken for, you know, different reasons, and people who want to divide us, you know, and separate us, and anything that can bring us together and bring that sense of community together, and you know, people meeting up over coffees, over, you know, it really is important. And I think that's why, you know, from a social perspective, it's not just purely about politics. I mean, the most enjoyable part I had of campaigning was actually just talking to people on the doorstep, you know, and probably some of my supporters probably got quite angry with me because I spent too much time talking to people on the doorstep. But it's just a joy to be able to speak to fellow members of your community. And obviously, like you said, because I'd never been involved in politics, there are people I would have spoken to that I would have never met in any other capacity, you know, being a resident. So just being able to speak to, you know, the 92-year-old, you know, who I met recently, telling me about how Edmonton had changed, how, you know, the dual carriageways were single carriageways when she was growing up, you know, and just stuff like that. And it's just really nice to kind of get that sense of where we were and where we've been, and kind of what a journey we've on. And I think, you know, I think it's really important. That's how you build communities, and that's how you build people who, you know, live together, share spaces together. And, you know, obviously, you know, confront what we saw over the summer, which is what, you know, we all ideally what we don't want to see going forward.
Mm-hmm.
It's proper. It's part of the proper democracy as well, you know, rather than the idea of going through the motions of it, and then we already know what we want to do, and we'll just then sort of lightly consult with either the members or the electorate to try and shoehorn that already developed opinion into policy, whereas actually, you know, people that you have to actually believe in the democracy. It's not just an ornament. It is the process. It is how you get to proper decisions, and without it, you just, you know, you're pretending at it, aren't you? I just wanted to ask though about so. I think to try and not totally butcher the quote, but Thatcher said something along the lines of "There's no such thing as community," and sort of in the post-Thatcher era, how is it about getting back to those community links and rebuilding that which you was damaged under Thatcher, and as very little has been done to repair an actual democratic link into our communities.
Yeah, and I think with society, correct me if I'm wrong, I think she said there was no such thing as society. Yeah, I think that's right. But yeah, no, society. And I think and with the adage of with the introduction of social media now, and obviously post COVID, there's a huge amount of there's a lot of detriment in terms of how people act, especially youngsters. There isn't an element of people coming together. Youth centres are a big issue. I mean, we've had a number of youth centres closed locally. And we all know the importance of youth centres in terms of encouraging people, youth to gather and come together and keep them off the streets, etc. So it really is important that we try and build that, and like you say, we act as facilitators and give people spaces to be able to come together. And my personal opinion is the more we have people, especially of different backgrounds, talking to each other, the more problems in society do we cure, and because the reality is the issues, especially the racism problem that we have, is because people don't talk to each other. People don't talk to each other. You've got groups or pockets who just stick amongst themselves, and only hear one narrative, a bit like social media online. If you're a particular, the algorithm just draws you to that particular group, and if you don't have interaction with other people, that's where problems kind of fester. And I think that's why our group, and I'm proud, to be fair, that in our group that we've got such a diverse group in our independent group, both from a racial perspective and a kind of an ethnic background perspective, but also politically. So we've got, we work with the Tusk people locally in the Socialist Party. We've had discussions with the Greens and the workers. We've reached out to them. It is very much trying to be inclusive, not trying to be one particular thing. And I think it is important because that's how we break down barriers. And that's how we break down. And it's important that we do that. It's like I said, I go back to the summer. If you get it wrong and you don't do things properly, you leave a vacuum for people to come in. And it does. But a question, George, it does go a question in terms of the local by-election that I'm standing in. We got beaten by Reform at the election. So. And I was quite amazed that a kind of like a borough like ours in Enfield, Edmonton, which is very diverse, could have such a high Reform, vote, especially given that the candidate did nothing on the ground. It was just a paper candidate that was on the back of Nigel Farage's huge amount of campaigning on TV that they gave air for. And just on the by-election, and just if I took my Facebook kind of feed as an example, there's a huge amount of people supporting Reform. There's a huge amount of people supporting Reform, and we have to give them an alternative. We on the left as independent socialists have to say, look, your ills are the problems of austerity, the problems of the ruling class. So those are the people that you should be looking at. The fact that you've got millionaires increasing manifold, billionaires coming from, wealth inequality. Those are the issues that are really causing the problems for working classes. And so if we don't come out with that message, and not very strong and clear as independent socialists, there's a vacuum where people will say, well, I'll vote Reform because, I don't like what I'm seeing, and these guys are the only ones that will do anything about it. And so there's a real importance, I think, certainly for this by-election for us to as a minimum to make sure we take on Reform and we challenge Reform and we give people an alternative and say, look, actually, you don't need to vote Reform because we hear what you say, we know what the issues are. We've got people that, obviously local people that, feel the same way. And if you do want to protest, it should be on our side of the fence, not theirs, So it really is important that we do fill that vacuum in.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, we were at the count for the general election and seeing when we were sampling the results coming through, seeing the results and the amount of votes coming through for Reform. And like you say, none of the main parties were talking about people's actual material needs. The policies that they were standing on were quite abstract, nothing to address the real sort of things that people need addressing in their lives: housing, proper decent wages, access to healthcare, things like that. And you had Reform coming on and saying, oh, we were going to address all these problems, but the root of all these problems, rather than, as we all know, it's austerity and the results of that and underfunding, they were putting it to, this is for these other people that are your neighbours, that are your colleagues, and scooping up those votes because people, the other parties, refuse to talk about those issues. Coming back to talking about social media, I know that a lot of the reform comments and posts and things that I've seen from are from bots, and I know that you've had some similar issues yourself. So what sort of issues have you seen online with that?
Well, I think there's an element. There's an element of it was interesting because this is a funny story. It's a funny story. So, as I said to you, my journey towards politics has been long convoluted. But my presence on social media was non-existent. When I say non-existent, I had, before I set up the action group in March, I had no social media. None. So I'm forget TikTok, forget Instagram. I didn't even have Facebook. That's how bad I was. So no Twitter, no. So I literally started from scratch. So we obviously set up. We've got our Twitter accounts and Instagram. So now I think I'm on TikTok now as well. So I'm getting really good followers on TikTok. So it just goes to show, you can teach an old dog new tricks sometimes. But the interesting thing was our local Facebook groups, so the local Enfield Facebook groups, the reaction I got standing was incredible. It literally was, we've got someone who's trying to enable, discord. On the back of Gaza, you've got someone who's going to cause more problems. Are they a genuine candidate? Huge amount of backlog, standing as an independent local resident who grew up in the area for 45 years. I went to local schools, and that was very clear on my campaign material. But the narrative from a lot of the local Facebook groups were, clearly there's someone here who's just trying to divide us on the back of Gaza and cause it. And I found that incredible. Because they just looked at the face, they looked at the skin color, and they looked at and that was it. That was, all the other stuff was just pushed out to this one side of the window. And so I think what you find on social media is that obviously those who kind of shout loudest tend to be the way, and there is a lot of people who actually don't think that way or feel that way. And I think engagement on social media is really important in terms of understanding where people come from, but not necessarily thinking that they represent everyone in the community. And I think that's really important for people to understand, especially if you're new to social media. You kind of learn that very quickly that, you're not, just because someone just replies to all your posts, it doesn't mean they're the only one or the only one, the only way they're thinking. And I think, like you say, there are a lot of bots online. There are a lot of things that you need to kind of take with a pinch of salt. But there is no doubt in terms of our campaign, our social media has definitely helped us, grow as an independent movement. We obviously rely on leafleting, rely on door knocking, but obviously we rely on to get our message out there, to use social media. And I think we'll grow and learn as we did from the general election in this ballot election as to how we take that forward. Because I do think it's not the panacea, social media. You can't just have a campaign on social media. It needs to be across the board. You do need to go and knock on doors. But there's a nice marriage between the two that you can kind of strike a balance to. But it's certainly been a journey for me, for someone who's not been on any social media, to be suddenly on all these different platforms. It's quite funny.
Yeah, when you mentioned TikTok, I just could add visions of you doing these TikTok dances. Is that what you get to do?
Not yet, Laura. Not yet. I don't ever get to them.
Never know. See where the campaign goes. So have you seen a lot of disparity, Khalid, with the sort of reaction you get on social media and the reaction when you are out on the doors?
Absolutely. When you're on social media, people don't know who you are. People don't know what your background is. People don't hear you. That haven't necessarily seen a video. They don't know who you are. So they make assumptions. And that's the reality. When I speak on the doorstep, and I say, well, I grew up here. I went to school here. I mentioned the names of the schools that I went to. Everyone recognizes them. They realize that actually it's just someone who is just like us, and who lives here and is there, knows all the roads, knows all the, and so there is a huge difference between online interaction, and offline. And I think that's why it's important that you do take our message. We as the independents, socialists can't just rely on social media. We just need to feel confident in ourselves. I mean, we have a good story to tell. You know, we have a good storyteller. We are on the right side of history on many issues. You know, and I think it's important that we don't feel, you know, kowtowed by people saying that we shouldn't be saying what we believe in. You know, absolutely, because if we do, then people will come with us because they say, well, okay, you know what, it's time that things are said. You know, and I'll give you an example in terms of from a policy perspective. You know, I think the Greens initially were the only party that had a wealth tax in their manifesto. You know, and for a long time they were there. But obviously you can see over the course of the election, you know, and obviously the budget coming up next week, there's huge outcry now from that to say, look, we need a proper wealth tax to tax wealth inequality, and that's grown over. It used to be the case, and obviously I come from a finance background because it used to be the case that the moment you mention a wealth tax, people say, well, it can't be done because people will leave, and that used to be the end of the story. People used to believe that. Yeah. Now there is much more pushback to say, no, that isn't the case. People are not going to leave, and it's been proven that. And so, you know, we have to feel comfortable that we can send our message across, we can push our message across, and don't feel like, you know, we have to be defensive about it. We can absolutely be very positive about it because people actually believe in it. But most people on the doorstep would agree people with extreme wealth should pay more. You know, it's just common sense. Most people would agree. It doesn't even matter what particular party affiliation is. Most people don't earn more than 100 million. You know, don't have wealth over 100 million, which means most people agree that actually, you know, those guys actually paying a little bit more to fund our public services is a sensible thing to do. You know, and so yeah, we need to be very positive in terms of the message that we convey, and don't feel that we have to be, quiet about it.
Not just that they have the ability to pay, but also to recognise the fact that they disproportionately benefit from the things that we fund out of our taxes. You know, those people will undoubtedly require there to be educated workers to come and work in their enterprise. There will have to be healthy workers. There will have to be roads to transport their goods around. You know, all the benefits that they need to run whatever particular business they're running are funded out of taxation, aren't they?
Exactly, and I think like I say, it's trying to get people to understand that message. And then the reality is, big business, you know, are very good lobbyists. You know, they will sell a narrative that say, oh, well, this can't be done because we will lose more jobs, or you know, we can't raise pay because you know unemployment will go up. And so you know, people buy into that narrative. But I think people are a lot more aware now that actually, you know, it is just sometimes a blocker to doing what should be done. You know, I remember, I mean, this is going back a few years, but when Blair came in 1997, there was huge uproar about the national minimum wage coming in. You know, saying I was going to take so many jobs, you know, we were going to lose so many jobs if we had a national minimum. Employers were going to go bust, and it came in, and everyone just accepts it now as being, you know, the right thing to do. You know, and and so I think there's a lot of that, you know, in terms of not introducing something because it's never been done before, what the impact is. The reality is, I mean, we're an aging population. The amount of the population, the percentage of the population working is going to go down, not up. So the more we rely on income tax, you know, on incomes, the less we're going to take. You know, so we really need to think about moving the tax base away from incomes to wealth, because it's wealth that's increasing, not income. And so as a country, we need to say, look, tax wealth so that we can invest into our economy. You know?
Exactly, and it's a great point that you just made then about, you know, people just accept things when they do come in. It is accepted, people crack on with it. And one thing for me that always sticks out is, you know, when people say, oh, it takes so long to affect change, or, you know, a policy that would come in and we can't do something overnight, we can't make these changes straight away. But actually, we saw during the pandemic that actually legislation can come in and be affected straight away. People do take it on board, do get behind it straight away, and things can be, you know, implemented really quickly and rolled out really quickly for the benefit of people.
You know, people just buy the establishment line. You know, people buy the status quo. They almost like, well, it must be the case because you know these civil servants are saying it's the case, so it must be true. There's no challenge. Our politicians should be challenging that kind of establishment line, that status quo. Well, why is it different? Why can't we do this? You know, what has it ever been done? Have we done a study? Have we consulted on this? You know, it's literally going native. I mean, I worked in Dubai for nearly 5 years. So I worked in the Middle East for 5 years. And there's a particular culture in the Middle East in terms that you fall into. One of it was like, you don't turn up to meetings on time. So it used to drive me absolutely mad, because in the UK, if someone says 10 o'clock, I'm there for 10 o'clock. I'll be there earlier. You know? In the Middle East, say 10 o'clock, you don't start until 10:15. You know, so, and it would, and I found that even people from the UK used to go native, as I used to say, because they just used to then do what everyone else does. You know, not really challenging. Well, that's not right, is it? It's like, you say 10, go for 10. And so, you know, I feel it's the same with our politicians. They just follow the establishment line. There's no challenge of the status quo. There's no sense of, actually, can we do things different? It takes real courage. I mean, you know, we go back to 1945, you know, and Attlee. I mean, nationalisation had never been done. The NHS had never been done. But it took courage, you know, to implement reforms that absolutely needed to be done, you know. And without the NHS, where would we be today in terms of healthcare? I mean, you see the disaster that's the States. You know, my wife is American, and so, you know, she keeps telling me of the huge amount of issues that people have there. But, you know, if you lose your job, you know, you could be homeless the next day because of the huge medical costs you have. So, you know, it took courage to build the NHS, to nationalise those industries. And I think, you know, we do need to challenge these establishment ideas and you know, not just accept, you know, them as being, you know, the right thing to do. You know.
And some of the things that you mentioned, which were radical ideas that proved that's not the case, and those things have endured. Nobody would dare to take the franchise away after the franchise was enlarged. Nobody would dare to take the NHS away. Nobody would dare. You know, there are certain things that once that hurdle has been got past, they become the bedrock of. You know, what people accept, don't they? They become part of what people expect in the country, don't they?
Well, it's like the national minimum wage. Like I said, there was such a furore about whether it was going to cost jobs or not. But now the discussion is actually now whether we should be paying the national living wage, shouldn't we? In terms of, because the minimum wage is like just accepted. That's, you know, that's what we should have. So absolutely, I think it takes bravery. I like to use the word courage. I like to use the word bravery. We need braver politicians. We need more courageous politicians, you know, not those who are just, you know, listening to lobbyists and lobby groups and listen to it, but actually, you know, saying, actually, what can we do differently? You know, sometimes, you know, blank A4 piece of paper, what should we do? If we start from scratch, what should we do? You know, that kind of thinking, not just the establishment type thinking that we seem to, you know, have all the time, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think that idea of courage is really important because, like you say, at the moment we seem to have a group of politicians in government that won't stray away from like the party line or from the status quo, even though, you know, the things such as the two-child cap, the stuff that we're seeing now with the pensioners' winter fuel allowance, and it's only a very small pocket of MPs that'll vote against those motions and things and vote against the government. But I think a lot of the MPs that we've got are thinking of their career and not with any courage. And that's at the detriment to their constituents.
Yep, absolutely. And like I said, we'll come back to that point about, you know, if you're actually a representative that's actually more concerned about your career, then actually it's the people that you represent that lose out, you know, because you're not really representing their views.
As well, I think there's something to be said about the mechanisms as well, because you know, in most of the parties, you get to be the candidate because you've, you know, stroked the right egos within that party, rather than an actual, again, representative model of selection within the party. And if there is a representative model, then if you don't satisfy your constituents, they can get shut of you. They can put somebody else in your place, and that mechanism actually encourages people to, I don't know, look at where their priorities lie, don't they?
But you know, in my view, and I say this a lot, you know, locally, it comes down to sincerity. You know, our politicians, how sincere are they in terms of the job that they're doing? Because we know people who are there just for their own career, you know, and they're filling a job not because they want to do it, but because they know it's a stepping stone to something else, you know. And frankly, those are the politicians that we could do without, you know. Whereas others who are genuinely sincere in the job that they've undertaken, they take their oath seriously, they take their role seriously, you know. They go out, they meet their people, meet constituents, you know, look at their problems, and actually want to fulfill, you know, their role to the best of their ability. And that's the type of people that we want to encourage, to stand to stand for elected office, because without that sincerity, really you could just be any other person just trying to crib a job. You're grifting effectively, trying to do something when you're more interested in something else, and that shouldn't be the case. Not when you're in an elected position, and people are relying on you, and that's what we need to prevent. Some just traditional, mean what you say, and that's why politics is seen as the dirty word, because whenever you kind of criticize people, they say, oh, well, it's politics, isn't it? It's politics. We use it that, well, it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be politics. It should be you either say that you mean it or you don't. None of this trying to, and I appreciate, again, I come from it slightly naively in terms of my background, but that's what most people would like to have from their politicians. Just someone who answers questions straight, admits when they don't know something, but will endeavour to do things for people, rather than trying to hide behind the position to further their position elsewhere.
I think that's. Sorry, George.
Well, I was just gonna say, and also that the elected role isn't just one of 2 or 3 or 4 jobs that they happen to hold.
Indeed.
What I was going to say was that this is another reason why it's great to have sort of the independent movement and new people, new faces coming into politics, because I also look at a lot of things just as an part of the electorate, and having that different viewpoint of what people actually need and what people want from their elected officials is a really good insight to have, rather than coming at the positions from where will this get me, coming into it as what can I do for people with this, and what do people need and what they're wanting. So I think that's a really big benefit from the independent movement, that we'll get more of those people in who have got that sort of viewpoint.
Yeah, I hope so, because I think that would be a definite plus. That would be a definite plus.
So there's a lot of independents across the country. Are you all sort of linked up? Is there like a network of you? What's the situation?
So there is growing. Like I say, at the election, a few of the independent movements across the country kind of linked together. So we in Enfield, like I said, we stood 3 independent candidates, but in our neighbouring borough in Haringey, the independent movement there stood a candidate against David Lammy. So we work closely with them, and obviously, like I said, through links and meetings, we're close in with Andrew in Camden, and obviously Jeremy. Pfizer obviously stood against Duncan Smith in Chincolm and Wood Green, which is the other neighbouring constituency that we have there. So you can see it is slowly growing, and obviously, the more we've kind of stood, the more candidates we've met across the place. So I would say we are definitely meeting more independent candidates, and we're starting to build those connections. Obviously, if we had a more formal organisation to do that, that would be great in terms of building those connections. But it is happening, and I think it is important that we do that, because we, if a lot of us are grassroots movements, so we don't have the kind of infrastructure, so it's really important that we learn from each other. And we share our knowledge. And I think, the election was a great example of that, where, I, for example, had just done my Royal Mail leaflet shot, which took an age to get out, because it's just the admin of just working out what you need to do and how to get the Royal Mail to post all your leaflets out. But then I managed to pass that on to the other candidates and say, like, okay, well, this is what you need to do. Don't worry about that. And so just that shared knowledge is really important, that we kind of build those networks, so that we don't have to reinvent the wheel every single time. And I think it's coming, and I think it's really good that it is coming, because we can build something with it, and important, like I say, build our own internal community, our own kind of political community, to take that forward. And you get to meet some really good people as well, across the country. Like I said, I love meeting people, and so hearing people from different parts of the country, hearing their experiences, their issues locally, is really good, and I think that's a definite plus all around.
Is there any route? Is there any route being explored with any kind of organised labour, trade unions, that side of things?
In terms of us linking locally with the trade unions, so we have a very close relationship with the Trades Council locally. So Enfield Trades Council is one of our supporters, and so. It's clearly, it's more difficult, obviously, to get union support, in terms of the different unions, in terms of, what they think. But the good thing is they're aware of us. We've built that awareness that we're not just sometimes when you say you're an independent, sometimes people think it used to be the case. Independent, oh, you're just a local resident who's standing for a particular issue and probably is going to get 10 votes and that's about it, kind of thing. But we're a lot more than that as independents, and I think there's something they're realizing that that's more. But it's absolutely, we want to be inclusive. One of the things I did when I started, I didn't want to exclude anyone. I wanted to bring it, as long as you kind of, agreed with the broad remit of what we were standing for, then you were welcome, and it was a space that you should be able to feel free in, and be inclusive of. And I think that's, that's still where we are in terms of trying to bring people in. Obviously, governing structures come in at some point. But, I think that's where, ideally we want to be at. And so unions are a big part of that, because they clearly have a big influence for all of their members.
Yeah, fantastic. So where are you now in the campaign, Khalid? How long have you got left? How close are you to the election?
So we learned an awful lot from the general election campaign. In the general election campaign, when Rishi made the announcement, we still hadn't made a decision on candidates. Like I said to you, we met with Kate Ossamore as well as a delegation. So by the time we made our decision to stand, we'd lost 2 weeks in the campaign. So we only stood literally, we only campaigned properly for 4 weeks. Mm-hmm. This time around, we started our campaign 2 weeks ago, and the nominations don't go until next Friday. So we've learned an awful lot in terms of timing. We've already been out there. The moment we knew the election was going ahead, mm-hmm. we were out there. We did an awful lot of work around the electoral list over the summer, identifying voters, targeting households, drew up a number of canvassing lists across the ward, brought people on board, getting volunteers to come and commit. So, we've learned an awful lot from, obviously, not necessarily, I'm not going to say mistakes of the general election, but the kind of the lack of knowledge and the lack of experience that we had. And so we feel a lot more confident, and you can feel it, in terms of the group, people coming out to canvass. It was raining at the weekend, but we had a good turnout last weekend in terms of things. So, there's real positivity. And that coupled with the fact that recent by-elections have been very, very poorly attended from a turnout perspective, means that actually you don't need a huge amount of votes to take a by-election seat. It's not something that is absolutely impossible to do, even as an independent. So we're very bullish, but at the same time, we recognise there's a lot of work to do, and the whole group and the team are committed to that. But I, as I say to everyone, we're enjoying the journey. There's no point in undertaking this and then being miserable and being thoroughly depressed in terms of I've got to go out canvassing tonight, or it's about going, enjoying something, and knowing that you're doing something right. You're doing something, mm-hmm. You're standing up for something you believe in and enjoying it. So we're trying to have fun at the same time in terms of doing what we're doing, and we won't lose for lack of effort. We'll put the effort in, and where we land, well, we'll see on the day after polling. So but yeah, it feels a lot. We've learned a lot, and we've put into a lot of that learning into how we're doing things. So yeah, we're really upbeat, and we're looking forward to the challenge. And we know Labour and Conservatives have already been out there as well, so they're taking our standing seriously. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting campaign. Yeah.
And do you find that the message gets through with a particular set of people? Are young people more receptive, or is it across the full spectrum, or is it?
No, it's pretty much across the spectrum, because across the spectrum, people are disillusioned. So whether you're young or you're old and you've seen it or done that, whether you're Muslim, you're non-Muslim, there's a lot of disillusionment, across ethnic origin and race.
Oh no.
I think we're just having a little technical difficulty there with Khalid. Hopefully we can get him back. Oh, this has never happened to us, this, George, before, has it? Oh, well, hopefully we can get Khalid back, and we can find out how we can help him on his campaign. What I think we can try and do is get some of Khalid's socials and things like that across the bottom. So any of our viewers and listeners can get in touch with Khalid or follow his campaign online. I think, George, we're seeing a lot of these independents, aren't we, coming forward and wanting to stand up for the communities and really wanting to show people that there is an alternative to the mainstream two parties.
Yeah, and I think there's been for a long time a sort of it's been an insult to for example, people within a political party who have wanted to have a particular candidate. All they wanted was their democratic choice to elect that, to have a chance to elect that person. They've been manipulated on and off shortlists. They've utilised all women shortlists to keep male candidates off. They've utilised BAEM shortlists when there's been different. They've manipulated what should be good equalities mechanisms to promote an equal chance for people, and they've utilised them as a game to keep off candidates that they didn't want to have on particular selections. I think there's been for generations there's been the parachuting effect, where I think the saying would be, if you stick a red rosette on a donkey, they'd get in round here. Well, that has been the case with where people who before they stood as a candidate for that particular area, nobody would have even recognised their name in that constituency or that council seat or whatever. So I think that there is an amount of fatigue of the sort of gaming of the system in that respect. I don't know whether you heard much of that, Khalid, but whether you have an opinion on any of those.
I just caught the tail end of that.
No problem. So we were just talking about how, it is great after so long and as so many people are so disillusioned with the process, the mainstream parties, that there is like the independent movement coming forward. Because like George was saying, a lot of the time we've seen local selections where it's been all women candidates to make sure that a specific male candidate doesn't get put in, and with BAME candidates being put in again to avoid putting somebody else on the ballot, and sort of manipulating those equalities measures that should be promoting equality and have been utilised to sort of keep people off selections.
Yeah, I mean, I think I say, if you've got passion and you can see that you want to do something, like say you should be allowed to put yourself forward, and there should be a democratic process, ultimately in terms of being chosen. But ideally, at the end of the day, you want your best candidate. You want the person that's actually going to be able to represent and connect with the electorate. And why would you kind of tie one hand behind your back in terms of not getting the right candidate? I think people, like you say, they respond to the fact if it's an open democratic process, they can see like I've got a chance. Then they'll accept the result, as well, in terms of like, well, such and such was clearly a lot better than me, so I'll put my back into there. So again, it's this is where, like I said to you, this sincerity comes back. Is that in the selection process, in these kind of back office deals that get done, it really isn't about doing what's best. It's really about furthering someone's agenda or some sort of mission that isn't actually for the greater good in terms of what people want. And I think that's what we need to try and avoid, and actually just go back to who is the best candidate, who can convey our message the best, and that really should be the person we should be backing.
Yeah. So just before we wrap up, Khalid, can you tell us how any of our listeners or viewers can get in touch with you, see what you're doing on your socials that you're now fantastic on, and how they can help you?
Yeah, exactly. So like I said, so all the by-election stuff now is up on our website. So the main kind of probably point of contact is our website, so enfieldcommunity.org, which I think you got up on the screen there. So there you can kind of access our the canvassing. So there's a get involved page, so you can sign up for kind of canvassing. So we've got canvassing dates weekly across the week and at weekends. And so if people want to kind of pop in for one particular canvassing session, they can more than feel entitled to. So, we can do that, and people can help out that way. We're going to be doing leafleting as well. So if people don't necessarily want to, be talking to people, there'll be leafleting sessions where people can just drop off leaflets and do roads for us. We've got a crowdfunder, obviously, as well. We rely heavily on leaflets and other communications. So that's on the webpage as well in terms of a donation page. So really, it's twofold, really. It's obviously, to try and win the by-election, but it's also then trying to bring the community together. It's a nice byproduct that we've got this opportunity whereby we are trying to, to make a stand locally and try and give people a different political voice. But at the same time, we've got this lovely byproduct where people come together to canvass, leaflet, and feel like they're doing something. And I think, given what we're seeing on our screens on a daily basis, people want to do something. They just want to be out there and actually feel like, I'm doing something for the cause, and this is my little bit of joining in, and we're more than happy to facilitate that.
Great. So yeah, as Khalid mentioned, all the details are on the website. If you're not in the local area, we ran a campaign here. Sean's campaign usually does some of the shows, and like you mentioned, money is really important to help run these campaigns. So if you are able to donate to Khalid's campaign, you can find the details of the crowdfunder on the website as well.
Yeah, there's a donate page there. You can just click on that. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us, Khalid. I really wish you all the best with the election. Hope it really goes well and not all the work that comes with that.
Excellent. Thanks, guys. Really, really enjoyed it.
Good luck. Thanks very much.
Okay.